In 2025, I gave a lot of tips and advice in my videos. And here are the top 5 tips that you need to take with you to 2026 if you want to achieve your band score in 2026. I made a recap video to give you my observations about the IELTS exam in 2025 and my prediction for 2026. So check it out if you haven't watched the video yet. Now let's talk about IELTS reading. Number 1, always look at the questions first. Now I'm talking about looking. I'm not talking about reading the questions because this is advice number 2. Depending on the kind of questions you are dealing with, you should be reading the text first or the questions first. Not all questions should be read first, or not all questions should require you to read the text first. Advice number 3 is something that you probably are being a victim of. Do not rely on keywords in the questions to find the answers in the text. Meaning is key, not keywords. Number 4 is to spend more time reading, understanding, and answering the questions rather than reading the text. And the last advice for IELTS reading is to always mark the locations of the answers whenever you have found them, because what if you need to look for them again? Now let's talk about IELTS listening. This is very simple, and I think probably you are doing this already, but I need to remind you to continue doing this, okay? Advice number 1 is to always spend the maximum amount of time that you are given to read the questions. This is critical because if you don't know what the questions are, you will not find the answers because you do not know what you are looking for. Advice number 2 is to try your best to predict the answers, especially when you have questions such as fill in the gaps. Moving on to number 3 is to stop reading the questions the second the recording starts. Because if you miss the first question, you will miss almost everything else after that. And the recording is played once only, you will not get a second chance. Advice number 4 is what I said specifically in this video, and you need to let the speaker finish the topic to confirm your answer. For example, if the question is about the location of a place, you need to let the speaker or the speakers completely finish the topic about the location of the place. When they move on to the next topic, then you can decide if the answer is correct or not. It happens very often that something that looks like the answer happens at the beginning, but then at the end, the speaker rejects that answer and gives you the correct one. So do not rush into confirming your answer the second you hear it. Let the speaker finish and then confirm. Advice number 5 is for someone who never checks the spelling and who is overconfident. Mistakes can happen, so always check the spelling and your choices. Now let's talk about IELTS Writing Task 1, the academic module, and I will be talking about IELTS Writing Task 1 General Training module a little bit later, okay? So in IELTS Writing Task 1, the academic module, there are 5 pieces of advice I want you to remember. Number 1 is to always distinguish between a trend and a comparison chart, because if you don't know the differences between these kinds of charts, you will not be able to do well in this test. And probably you are not ready for this exam yet. Check out this video to learn the differences between a trend and a comparison chart. Advice number 2 is to always spend about 5 minutes preparing for this report by making an outline. In this outline, you are going to write down the details you want to include in your report, the grammar, the vocabulary that you want to use, and this outline will help you stay in control of the report you are writing. The next advice is about the overview of this report. No data in the overview. You can put some time frames if you want, but no numbers, no figures, okay? Another no, and also advice number 4 is no conclusion. The report in IELTS Academic Writing Task 1 does not need a conclusion. And advice number 5 is to divide the data logically in paragraphs. We're not going to jam everything in just one paragraph. You need to have at least 2 paragraphs with data logically presented. Now let's talk about IELTS Writing Task 1, the General Training module. The first advice is to spend about 5 minutes making an outline for this letter. In this outline, you're going to write down the details you want to include in the letter, the grammar, and the vocabulary you want to use in your letter. Advice number 2 is about the opening of the letter. A lot of people do not include the aim of the letter in this part because they don't think or they don't know that it is necessary. But you need to be able to tell the examiner, or in this case, we're imagining that they are the recipient of the letter, to know exactly what you're going to do in this letter. Advice number 3 is to divide the body paragraphs according to the number of bullet points you have in the task. For example, if you have 3 bullet points, you are going to have 3 different body paragraphs, and each body paragraph is for 1 bullet point. We do not mix ideas, okay? Advice number 4 is to have proper paragraphing. We're not going to have 1 sentence paragraph. If the sentence is too long, break it into 2 different sentences. And if a sentence is too short, add another sentence. And the last advice for this part is to end the letter properly, not abruptly. Don't just stop. Say something before you stop. Now let's talk about IELTS writing test 2. The first advice is to spend about 5 to 7 minutes making an outline for this essay. The outline includes the ideas you want to include, the vocabulary and the grammar you want to use. And of course, we want to stay in control of whatever we are going to write. Advice number 2 is to spend time understanding the statements, because not all statements can be understood in a balanced way, especially when you have questions such as, do you agree or disagree? Not all statements can be balanced. Advice number 3 is what I've been talking over and over again. 1 body paragraph, 1 main idea. We're not going to have more than 1 main idea in a paragraph. Advice number 4 is to never leave a main idea unexplained and unsupported. You need to complete the argument by explaining and giving the argument an example. And the last advice is to always have a summary of the main ideas that you have in the conclusion. We have 5 more pieces of advice for IELTS speaking. Number 1 is to not answer the question right after the examiner finishes. You can take 1 to 2 seconds to take a breath before answering. This will give you a lot more confidence than answering the questions right away. Advice number 2 is to always answer the question directly. Don't beat around the bush. Don't give flowery information before answering the questions. Anything you want to include can be added after you have directly answered the questions. In this recording of my masterclass about IELTS speaking, I talk about everything you need to know about the IELTS speaking exam, so watch it after this video if you want to learn more about the IELTS speaking exam. Advice number 3 is to always elaborate the answers. Advice number 4 is to give a personal example whenever it is possible. A personal example is much better than a generic one when it comes to IELTS speaking. And the last advice for IELTS speaking is to try not to repeat words. If you find yourself repeating the same word for 3 times, maybe it's time you changed. If you want to learn everything you need to know about the IELTS exam in a reliable way, I have a guide that is free for you to use on my website called Everything IELTS, the comprehensive guide to IELTS. The guide is free on my website, practicenight.co. You can also join my Everything IELTS preparation plans for unlimited support and benefits, as well as evaluations directly from me. In the meantime, get free practice tests and a lot of free tools and tips on practicenight.co. I'll see you there. For now, you have fun learning. Bye.